Hello, this is Gair and Karunatillake. This is Further Readings 2, reading number 2, the one starting on page 27. Panchahi bhikkhave dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu chavati napatittati saddhamme. Panchahi dhammehi. This is the instrumental plural, and remember that, sadly for us, numerals decline as well. So this is the instrumental pancha, or pancha, 5, panchahi, instrumental. So by 5 dhammas, by 5 factors, or by 5 characteristics, or even just, more generally speaking, things, samannagato. We had this in the previous lesson. It's put in Kelly's translation as a monk endowed with 5 factors. An endowment often suggests something good or desirable. It can also have an undesirable meaning here, and indeed in the first part of this paragraph, if this reading it does. It can mean even something like beset by them, something that plagued by them even. That may be too strong a word. So samanagato means they're in attendance upon him. They go with him. So the bhikkhu, the monk, the bhikkhu, who is samanagato, who is attended by, endowed with, or even beset by, panchahi dhammehi, by 5 factors, 5 things. Chavati. Chavati means he falls. It's the Sanskrit root is actually chu, and chavati is the third person singular. He, she, or it falls. Chavati. Chu. The root for to fall is usually pat. Chu tends to mean to fall in more a moral sense or a political sense, as in falling from power. There's the phrase in Sanskrit, padachyuta. The past participle is chavati, is chuta. And we know the word pada, which has various meanings. One of them is your position or your status, from the root, as we remember, pada meaning foot. So it's your footing, your position, or your status. So, in Sanskrit, if you are padachyuta, you are status fallen. In other words, you've been knocked off your perch, no longer in power, no longer have the prestige or position or status that you had before. So you are padachyuta. So it really has, I don't recall that I've seen it in a physical sense of falling over. As best I recall, it's only in the sense of a fall from grace, from power, and so on. So the monk, so the chavati in Sanskrit just becomes, by normal phonetic mutation, chavati in Pali. So the monk falls. How is it put here? Chavati falls away, yes. So he effectively kind of loses what he had. He's lost the position that he had, or lost such virtue that he had. So exactly how you translate it depends on context, but falls away, declines, would you could have. So the monk who is beset or attended by these 5 factors of samanagato, panchehi dhammehi, chavati, napatittati saddhamme. So the monk attended by these 5 factors falls, and napatittati saddhamme. Sanskrit pratishta. And often it becomes retroflex. So pratishta. And in Pali, patitta. From our well-known root, of course, stha, meaning to stand, prati, pati, in Pali, it has the meaning of against, but not necessarily against in a hostile sense. It has the sense of in relation to, as opposed to, in response to, with regard to. So, I mean, for example, if you're leaning against a wall, it's not against in a hostile sense, it's just the way we use that the wall is there, you're leaning against it. Patikta, which you can translate as being steadfast, stands firmly, is established. Patikta means you stand up. Ta, to stand. You stand up, prati, you stand up in the face of things. Whatever happens to you, you remain standing. It's the idea not just of standing, but being steadfast, resisting everything that tries to knock you off. So patikta then has the meaning of steadfastness, standing up against it. Patikta, standing up against anything that happens to you. So the bhikkhu chavati napatiktati siddhame. So if he is beset by or accompanied by these 5 factors, the monk chavati falls away, napatiktati siddhame. He does not withstand, is not steadfast or well established, siddhame, in the good doctrine, the good law, the true law. This is the siddhame is the locative in the good law, so he is not steadfast in the good law. Katamehi panchahi. Katama is an interrogative meaning which ones or what type of thing, katama. So katamehi panchahi. Again here this is in the instrumental plural because it relates back to samanagato, so accompanied by 5 factors. Then the question, what 5? If you're putting it in Pali, you have to put it in the instrumental by what 5? Katamehi panchahi. Asaddho bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatittati saddhame. Asaddho. I'll explain the origin and etymology of asaddho, which is translated as non-determined. It's more like faithless, not having faith, rather than determination. It's a combination of both. I will explain the etymology in some detail because this is an absolutely prime example where you understand the etymology of a word from Vedic through to Pali and then the cognate in Latin. Then in relation to our own language, you can say, aha, we're still using the descendant of that word. So saddho is the Sanskrit root, though it's not used as a verb, only as a preverb. Shrad is a very ancient Vedic root. Well, pre-Vedic, goes back to Proto-Indo-European times. Sorry, there's a shrad. The idea behind it is faith or trust, belief. You can have faith in something, you trust it, you continue with it. You don't know that it's right, but you have faith and so you carry on. Now, we know that the sound sh in Vedic often emerges in both in Greek, Latin, and the Germanic languages, often as a k sound. The standard example is the Sanskrit shata, 100, Pali Satha, Latin centum. Shrad, it came through to Latin, the sh becomes a k. And the root cred, meaning to believe, and also to have trust. Now, curiously enough, in Vedic as well as in Latin, neither of these actually form of themselves a verbal root. Though in Latin, credere now looks like a verbal root. In Sanskrit, Vedic, you have the root, it's shrad and then dha. Dha meaning to place, to put. So faith putting, then that's a compound verb meaning to place your trust in, to have faith in. And also occasionally it's shraddha, literally to give faith, give. The shraddha with a dha, remember, two entirely different sounds in Pali. Shraddha is far more common. Incidentally, in Latin, the most ancient form of it is credare. Dare to give, credare to give faith. And later on, of course, it became credere. Of course, in modern Italian, it becomes credere, not credere. So there we see the shrad, cred, shraddha, or shraddha, credare, becoming credere. And then into modern English, credit, credence, I can't credit that, is from our same root, shrad. Now that root, shrad, and as usual, becomes just sad in Pali, sad. And then as in Sanskrit, saddha. Saddha is either a verb, saddhati. It's also, coincidentally, exactly the same form as the noun. So saddha just means now credare, giving faith, just faith as the abstract noun. And the adjective saddho, just in the stem form, saddha, as an adjective, saddha just means having faith. And then with this extension of being steadfast in your faith. Rather just as our word in English, faith, can mean you have faith in something, meaning you just believe it. Or also in older usage, if you keep your faith, it has the sense of remaining loyal even through trials and tribulations. I kept my faith, I remained steadfast, I remained loyal to my duty. And it has that same kind of meaning here. In Pali usage, it has the meaning of trust, as in particular trust in a teacher, or trust in anybody that you're learning from. You don't actually know that they know it because you don't know it yet, but you place trust in them, and that enables you to learn. So, asadho bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhamme. So, O monks, the asadho bhikkhu, the might translate as the faithless bhikkhu, faithless monk, chavati napatithati saddhamme. He does not remain steadfast in the good law. Next line, ahiriko bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhamme. Ahiriko. The word is hiri. Which is quite similar to the uttapi and uttapi that comes in the next line. Similar in meaning, not in form, of course. Hiri, the idea of hiri is a certain kind of modesty or shame. it's an internal quality. The hiri is what you feel as if you've done something shameful. It's nothing to do with being found out, the embarrassment of being caught. It's the idea that you don't do something because of an internal moral quality. You don't do it because whether you're caught or not, there's the inner sense of hiri, shame about it. And then that spills over into the not only self internally, but self with others as well. You can feel then hiri if you're caught doing something that should internally have stopped you because of your internal hiri. So if you are hirika, one who feels shame, or here, now the ahirika, you have no sense of shame, is what it means. So the ahiriku bhikkhu bhikkhu, the shameless monk, ahiriku bhikkhu, the bhikkhu who is ahiriku, who has no sense of shame, chavati napatithati saddhame, does not remain steadfast in the true law. Anuttapi bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Uttapi. There are two forms in Pali, uttapi, the short a and a double p, or uttapi, long a, single p, and they're both correct. As you'll see in a moment, the uttapi is closer to the original Vedic form. The root is trap, and that bears the meaning of fearfulness, but it's like a moral fearfulness. It's the fearfulness of doing wrong. Again, it's similar to hiri, the modesty, scrupulousness as internal moral qualities. Now, ava, with the verbal prefix ava, meaning off or away. So avatrap in Vedic would mean to be frightened off, scared off, and that ava is cognate with our English preposition off. So the idea is the avatrap is that if you're contemplating a shameful act, or indeed a shameful omission, or just an omission that's act or omission contrary to the teaching, you are frightened off doing it because of the inner sense of morality. I'm not going to touch that. That's the avatrap. The verbal noun in Sanskrit is avatrapa, so being frightened of. Ava, very frequently in Pali, just becomes reduced to an o. It's the same word, just ava becomes o. Just as in English, in modern English, of often becomes o. If it's 12 o'clock, it used to be 12 of the clock, and the of was often to o of 12 o'clock. Though, of course, remember the ava is not of, but off. Just illustrating it, the same kind of thing has happened in English. So, ava, o. Tra becomes a double T. So the avatrapa becomes uttapa, being frightened off by the idea of doing something wrong. And if the person, that's the verbal noun, being frightened off, and a person who is characterized by being frightened off has that as a certain characteristic, then he is uttapin, which is the stem form, and in the nominative singular, the n drops, and it becomes uttapi. So uttapi means the idea is you're scrupulous about it. You have this internal fear of doing wrong. It's given here as the uttapi with uttapi with a double p. It means exactly the same thing. This is a slightly anomalous form. I prefer to say uttapi, but Pali can have uttapi or uttappi, with no difference of meaning. So anuttappi bhikkhave bhikkhuchavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame. So the unscrupulous, that's mean unscrupulous in the sense of he doesn't attend carefully to his behavior and his duty. That meaning of unscrupulous. So anuttappi bhikkhave bhikkhuchavati, so the unscrupulous or the not carefully attentive monk, O monks, chavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame, he falls and is not standing firm in the true law. Kusito bhikkhave bhikkhuchavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame. Kusito, we had that in one of the early lessons in the form of the verbal noun kusajja. The etymology has got, or the word has got slightly distorted. It is likely to have originated in kusid or kusad, meaning bad sitting in the sense of lazing about. So kusito, one who is a bad sitter, who wrongfully sits about, lazes about, doing nothing. So kusito bhikkhave bhikkhuchavati. So bhikkhave, O monks, the kusito bhikkhu, the lazy monk, chavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame. Next line, duppanyo bhikkhave bhikkhuchavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame. Duppanyo, we all know the word panya, meaning wisdom. Panya, wisdom. We all also know the prefix du, which then will generally double the following consonant, as in dukkha and dukkha. Basic meaning is bad, but generally lacking in it, or not having enough of it, or just negating things. So duppanya, meaning having little wisdom or just lacking panya. Note that the noun panya is a feminine noun, wisdom, ending in a long a. Where that noun becomes part of an adjective, now duppanya is an adjective meaning unwise or having little wisdom. The final a just becomes the ordinary short a of the short a declension nouns and adjectives. So panya noun, duppanya adjective of little panya. This is a standard way of doing it. Whenever you have a noun ending in a long a, which then becomes part of a compound adjective, the long a of the feminine noun becomes the short a of the short a declension and decline. So, of one who is unwise would be the dupanyassa, and so on. So, and you'll see here dupanyo now declines as an ordinary masculine, nominative masculine of the a declension. So the dupanyo. Duppanyo bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatiṭṭhati siddhame. Imehi ko bhikkhave panchahi dhammehi. Katamehi, by which. Katamehi panchahi, by which 5. Imehi panchahi, by these 5. Imam, this imehi, instrumental plural. Imehi panchahi dhammehi. Bhikkhave, O monks, the ko here, it's just an infill particle. It doesn't really alter the sense. It is by these 5, or just by these 5. It doesn't really add anything. It's something that's inserted for sentence balance. You could equally well say then, imehi panchahi dhammehi samanagato, attended by these 5 characteristics. Bhikkhu chavati, na patithati saddhame. Now we get to the opposite now of what was said before, the contrast. Panchahi bhikkhave dhammehi samanagato bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. So samanagato, attended by or endowed with panchahi dhammehi, by 5 qualities, bhikkhu nachavati, the bhikkhu does not fall away. Patithati saddhame, he remains steadfast in the good law. Katamehi panchahi, by what 5? Now here we have got effectively just the negation, saying the same thing but in the reverse negated form. Saddho bhikkhave. Before we had asaddho, faithless. Saddho now, the positive form of that, faithful, one who possesses faith. Saddho bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Hirima bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Hirima. We had hiri, a sense of modesty or shame, and we had the negating form ahirika, shameless. The alternative way, another way of endowed with or possessing, is the standard adjective lending mant. So, sorry, hirimant. So hirimant just means having shame or a sense of shame. And the nominative singular, masculine nominative singular form of that, it becomes ma. So hirima is the opposite of ahiriko, hirima, who has a sense of shame. So hirima bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Uttapi bhikkhave bhikkhu. Uttapi, above we've had anuttapi, that's the unscrupulous. Here now is the positive form, uttapi, the one who has his scruples, who are attending to the minor details of what he shouldn't do. So uttapi bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Akusito, that's just the opposite of kusito, the unlazy. Akusito bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Panyava bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Panyava. We had panya, wisdom. We've just seen this, the suffix mant, as in hirimant, nominative singular hirima. Vant declines in exactly the same way and has exactly the same meaning. It's just that you tend to see the vant after words ending in an a, and the mant after words ending otherwise in an a, as in hiri. It's more naturally hirimant rather than hirivant. You wouldn't say hirivant, hirimant. So panya. If you add the vant suffix, the long a shortens to a, so panyavant. And as with mant becomes ma in the nominative masculine singular, so panyava. So panyava just means having wisdom or wise. So panyava bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. And again, the summarizing line at the end, you already have everything you know to understand this perfectly. Imehi ko bhikkhave panchahi dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. So a bhikkhu samanagato, who is attended by, endowed with imehi panchahi dhammehi, with these 5 qualities, characteristics. Nachavati patithati saddhame. Right, I'll go through this reading now slowly, unbroken, and try to follow it as I go along. Panchahi bhikkhave dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Gatamehi panchahi asadho bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Ahiriko bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Anuttappi bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Kusito bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Duppanyo bhikkhave bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Imehi ko bhikkhave panchahi dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu chavati napatithati saddhame. Panchahi bhikkhave dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Gatamehi panchahi saddho bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Hirima bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Uttapi bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Akusito bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Panyava bhikkhave bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. Imehi ko bhikkhave panchati dhammehi samannagato bhikkhu nachavati patithati saddhame. And that's it. That brings us to the end of Gair and Karunatillake, lesson 2.